It was a bright Saturday morning when the Johnson family decided to visit the local animal shelter. They had recently moved to a quiet suburban neighborhood and thought adopting a pet would help their children, Lily and Max, adjust to their new surroundings. At the shelter, a small black dog caught Lily's eye. He was a mix of breeds, with glossy fur and piercing blue eyes. Unlike the other dogs that barked and jumped in their cages, this one sat quietly, watching her with an intensity that made her feel both curious and uneasy. "Can we take him, Mom?" Lily pleaded. Mrs. Johnson smiled. "Sure, sweetheart. He seems perfect." The shelter staff told them the dog's name was Shadow. He had been found wandering near an old, abandoned house on the outskirts of town. Despite his mysterious past, the Johnsons were excited to give Shadow a loving home. At first, Shadow seemed like the ideal pet. He was well-behaved, affectionate, and quickly bonded with Lily and Max. However, strange things started happening soon after they brought him home. Shadow had a peculiar habit of staring at corners and dark spaces, growling softly, at nothing. At night, the family would often hear scratching sounds coming from the walls, but when they investigated, there was nothing there. One night, Lily woke up to find Shadow sitting at the foot of her bed, staring at her with those unnerving blue eyes. She reached out to pet him, but his growl made her withdraw her hand. "Go back to sleep, Shadow," she whispered, pulling the covers over her head. As weeks passed, Shadow's behavior grew more disturbing. He became increasingly aggressive, snarling at family members without provocation. The once playful dog now seemed constantly on edge. One evening, Mrs. Johnson was cooking dinner when she heard a loud crash from the living room. She rushed in to find Max on the floor, his arm bleeding. Shadow stood over him, his teeth bared and eyes glowing with a strange, unnatural light. "Shadow, no!" Mrs. Johnson screamed, pulling Max away. Shadow backed off, but his gaze remained fixed on Max, a low growl rumbling from his throat. The family decided to seek help. They called a local veterinarian who, after examining Shadow, could find nothing physically wrong with him. The vet suggested they contact an animal behaviorist, but even that didn't help. Shadow's behavior only worsened. One night, Lily had a vivid dream. She saw a shadowy figure standing by her bed, whispering in an ancient, guttural language.
"Pidi pas etigin, buhainen, ilakuse, tot efalaya, stekton, ideh, farambi, gach atol." She couldn't understand the words, but the sense of malice was unmistakable. When she woke up, Shadow was there, staring at her with those glowing eyes. Terrified, Lily confided in her friend, Emma, who had always been interested in the supernatural. Emma suggested they visit an old, reclusive woman known for her knowledge of the occult. The woman, known as Madame Serena, listened intently as Lily described Shadow's behavior. She nodded knowingly and asked them to bring the dog to her. When they arrived with Shadow, Madame Serena's face grew serious. She lit candles and began chanting in a language Lily had never heard before. Shadow thrashed and snarled, but seemed unable to move beyond a certain point.
"This animal is possessed," Madame Serena said gravely. "A dark spirit has taken hold of him." Lily's eyes widened. "Is there anything we can do?" Madame Serena nodded. "There is a way, but it will be dangerous. The spirit must be cast out." That night, the Johnson family gathered in their living room, with Madame Serena at the center, preparing for the exorcism. She drew protective symbols on the floor and lit incense that filled the room with a pungent, almost suffocating aroma. Shadow was restrained, his growls growing louder and more menacing. Madame Serena began chanting, her voice rising and falling in a rhythmic pattern. The air grew colder, and the lights flickered ominously. Suddenly, Shadow let out a blood-curdling howl, and his body convulsed violently. The room seemed to darken, and a shadowy figure emerged from the dog, twisting and writhing in the air before disappearing with a final, ear-piercing scream. The room fell silent. Shadow lay still, his breathing shallow but steady. Madame Serena sighed in relief, wiping sweat from her brow. "The spirit is gone," she said. "Shadow should return to his normal self now. But be warned, such entities are drawn to places of strong emotional resonance. Be vigilant." In the days that followed, Shadow gradually returned to his old, playful self. The aggression and eerie behavior ceased, and the house felt lighter, as if a dark cloud had lifted. However, the Johnsons couldn't shake the feeling that they had narrowly escaped something truly sinister. They made sure to keep a close watch on Shadow, just in case. Months passed, and life returned to normal for the Johnson family. Shadow was once again the loving pet they had hoped for. Yet, on quiet nights, when the wind howled and the house creaked, Lily sometimes caught a glimpse of those blue eyes in the shadows, watching. Was it just her imagination, or did a piece of the darkness still linger? The story of Shadow serves as a reminder that sometimes the things we bring into our homes come with a past we might not be prepared to face. Be careful when you open your door to the unknown, for not all spirits can be so easily banished. And that, my friends, is the story of the possessed pet. Sleep tight and keep an eye on your furry friends. You never know what might be lurking within.